I told you yesterday that I had concerns about your handling of military recruiters on campus when you were dean of the Harvard Law School. And let me just ask you some questions about that, just to sort of establish exactly what happened so everybody can get their brain around it. You argue that the military had good access to recruit Harvard Law students even during the periods before 2002 and from November 2004 through September 2005, when the military was barred from using the services of the Office of Career Services, correct?
I think that the military had good access during the periods where the Office of Career Services handled it, and had good access when the Veterans Association handled the matter.
And when they were barred from the Office of Career Services, you believe they still had good access? That's my question.
Yes, when the Office of Career Services did not provide the assistance, but instead the Veterans Association provided the assistance. And I think that the figures suggest that both before 2002 and in the single recruiting period in 2005, when the Veterans Association handled this, there were just no differences in the numbers. To the extent that there were any differences, they went up in 2005.
Of course, you can't tell, and we can't know what they would have been if they still would have had access to the Office of Career Services. But basically, you've gone on to answer my second question. During the time when they were barred from the Office of Career Services, they had access to the Harvard Law School Veterans Association, and which was an alternate channel for military recruiting, correct?
That's correct. Way back before I became dean, my predecessor put in place this accommodation, this way of trying to defend the law school's anti-discrimination policy, but also enabling the military to recruit. And that used the Veterans Association, and the Veterans Association in all those years was just great in doing the things that the Office of Career Services otherwise would do.
And as the dean of the law school, you had the power to make an exception to the anti-discrimination policy if you chose to do so, correct?
Well, it was a faculty-approved anti-discrimination policy, but I do agree with you, Senator Cornyn, that I would have, I would have gone to the, I do agree with you that I had substantial authority over that question.
That's all I'm asking. Conversely, the United States military didn't have any discretion to waive that policy because it was a product of a congressional act. Do you agree with that?
I do, that the military could not sign the discrimination policy that Harvard had because of the statute that was passed by Congress. And that, of course, presented the issue that was involved, is that the military could not sign the school's anti-discrimination policy. The school and I, as dean, felt a real imperative to enforce that policy, to defend that policy, but still to ensure that the military had very good access to all our students so that they could serve in the military because, that was of critical importance.
And this is really the nub of it. The Solomon Amendment, which is what we're talking about, denies federal funds to an educational institution that prohibits or in effect prevents military recruiting. Isn't that true? That generally what the Solomon Amendment does, it denies federal funds to an institution that denies or prohibits or in effect prevents military recruiting on campus.
Yes, it places a condition on federal funding.
Right.
And I forget the exact language that the Solomon Amendment, but it's about military recruiting on campus. But
well, and I think my notes here from your earlier testimony were to the effect that you believe that this alternative through the Veterans Center and other locations on campus provided a, quote, equally effective substitute, close quote. Is that correct?
This policy, I think, had worked well in the period before I became dean up until 2002. The Department of Defense had found this policy fully acceptable, and it was my understanding that the Department of Defense that was true, that their view that the policy enabled them good access was right, that the policy did enable them good access.
But your understanding was at a certain point in time that if Harvard Law School continued with this policy of denying them access to the Office of Career Services, it would be denied federal funds.
Well, that happened before I became dean. So that happened a year before. In 2002, the Department of Defense said that it had changed its mind, that for many years it had found the Harvard policy acceptable and had thought that it provided full access. In 2002, the Department of Defense came to the school and said that it, in fact, wanted the assistance of the Office of Career Services.
Well, and this is my final point on this. If, as you say, that this policy of Harvard Law School in barring the military recruiters from the Office of Career Services had no impact on military recruiting at Harvard Law School, it strikes me that the sole result and impact was to stigmatize the United States military on the campus, a service, the services that you say that you honor. So explain to me what impact the policy had to other than to stigmatize the military.
Senator Cornyn, it certainly was not to stigmatize the military, and every time I talked about this policy and many times besides, I talked about the honor I had for the military and how much the military meant to our country and how we all have the freedoms that we have because of the military.
I heard you say that, and I would stipulate that is what you've said all along. But if the policy had no impact on recruiting at Harvard Law School, what possible purpose could it serve other than to stigmatize the military? In effect, you provided a separate but equal means of providing access to students on the campus.
I think the purpose of the policy was something different, was certainly not to stigmatize the military. The purpose of the policy was to express support for our students who were being discriminated against, for our gay and lesbian students who wanted to serve in the military. And the policy was meant to support them or to support, with respect to other employers, any other students who were being discriminated against, and to say, you know, we support those students. And at the same time, to ensure that our students who wanted to go into the military had excellent access to military recruiters and vice versa.